Number 7, in general, a site design should try to balance the arterial and local streets, B, cut and fill, C, PUD, D, the deciduous and the coniferous. Well, there's all kinds of things that we would be interested in with deciduous and coniferous, but it's not really about balancing. We may use deciduous trees that leaf during the summer, but then those leaves fall away in the winter. We may use that for shading devices for buildings or outdoor areas. We may use them for aesthetic reasons or wind in certain ways. Coniferous trees, which keep their leaves, the needles generally, evergreens, keep their leaves all year. That's not going to be something we would generally use for shading the shape of a coniferous trees, while not kind of always the case. I'm going to draw a little Christmas tree here. I don't get that big canopy that I get with a deciduous tree that's going to give me a lot of shade. With a coniferous tree, I'm just going to get a much smaller amount of shade that's going to come from that. So they're just not very useful from a shading standpoint. Plus, generally, when I'm thinking about it from a shading standpoint, I want shade in the summer, but I don't want shade in the winter. So the idea that the leaves of a deciduous tree drop, very useful. Whereas coniferous is not so useful from that, of kind of getting me the benefit of the sunlight during the winter. So deciduous and coniferous trees, there's lots of interesting things to talk about, but it's not about balancing. That's just not what you're doing there. You're getting the benefits out of it. You might want all deciduous trees. You might want all coniferous trees to block a lot of wind all winter, something like that. But that's just not how it's going to work. PUD, we just talked about the planned unit development. That's, again, it's not about balancing anything, it's about making a proposal. So that's not really our potential answer. So not C and not D. So then our question here is arterial and local streets and cut and fill. Arterial and local streets is actually kind of an interesting set of issues that relate to this, but it's, again, not about balancing. You are engaging arterial streets in a particular way, and you are engaging local streets in a particular way. So for example, if you were on a corner and there was an arterial street, arterial meaning big street that's like the one of the main arteries of that local area, so it's a big main street where the cars are going pretty fast, you would probably not put a house driveway going out where they're going to back out into that arterial street. You would probably, yes, I would do that onto the local street, but not onto the arterial street. So again, there are issues with arterial and local streets that I would want to think about and make sure I was using appropriately, given the site and given the location, what I had access to, but it's not something that I can balance. So we're down to and left with cut and fill. So what the hell is cut and fill? Well, cut and fill is the idea that if I'm being a smart designer and I decide that we're going to dig out, we're going to excavate a bunch of the site in order to do a basement and to do some bioswales and to move the water around in a particular way, I'm going to dig a bunch of soil out. I can either take that soil and put it in a bunch of trucks and truck it somewhere at massive expense because soil is heavy and the trucks are expensive, or as a smart designer, I can say, well, wouldn't it be smart if I dig out some over here, maybe I make a mound over there. And that's the idea of balancing cut and fill. This is kind of like that idea about sunlight getting to every unit. This is one of those things, it's not a rule, it's not something that has to be. This is something that is just about sort of good design, being smart about your design activities. So this is an unwritten rule that the folks at NCARB and AIA and sort of every guidebook you'll ever see will say it's just sort of a thing you should know, that if you're doing site work, you would try to balance cut and fill so you don't have extra cost. And also all the weird things that happen when you start taking soil that might be contaminated from one place or have certain kinds of invasive species, and then you're going to dump it somewhere else, and now those invasive species have moved on and spread even more. So there's actual reasons to do it, but it's mostly about just being kind of a good designer in the world.